I just got ambushed live on French TV.
Parce que c'est gratos et qui n'ont jamais cotisé de leur
En
vie.
moyenne, les gens que vous faites venir en France, pour voir ce que représentent les 10% qui versent.
About a common misconception. Americans moving to France for the free French healthcare system. That's simply not true. We're going to break down this interview and actually dissect what is myth and what is reality. Right, let's jump straight in.
Richard Hammond est en direct avec nous. Bonjour, merci d'avoir accepté notre invitation. Donc vous êtes le patron de cette entreprise.
So up until now, guys, I'm thinking, hey, I'm just being invited to talk about Americans moving to France, not really realizing where they were trying to take this.
French Connections, qui donc aide les Américains à s'installer en France. D'abord, ça veut dire que la France, aux yeux des Américains, reste un paradis.
So she's trying to insinuate that France is a paradise to the views of most American people. And at that stage, I'm kind of, okay, I know where they're going with this. So I was just going to de-escalate the situation by saying, well, actually, you believe that American people are coming to France for free healthcare, but it's not actually free, and this is why.
Alors oui, la bonne nouvelle, c'est que je vais faire peut-être redescendre la tension de tout le monde.
Maybe by saying that I was going to lower everybody's tension in the actual room, I shouldn't maybe have not started with that, because that's what then accelerated what's going to follow.
Ce n'est pas gratuit, en fait, le système social pour les Américains qui arrivent en France. D'ailleurs, il faut qu'ils contribuent 9% de...
So what I'm explaining here is that the misconception that they were trying to put in place towards this argument that people were moving to France for free medical, the actual images that they were showing was, well, mainly of a couple that have used our services that were commenting on how cheap they found the cost of actual medication in France opposed to the USA. And that is one key misconception of this whole kind of attack on America right now, is that, well, what is very expensive in the US is actually very inexpensive in France. And that's what most people find. And indeed, also what the journalists were not mentioning is that before you actually move to France, you have to apply for a visa. And those visa regulations require you to have a private medical policy before you even arrive on French territory. The second misconception is, well, in the second we're going to look at this.
Revenu global annuel, c'est une grosse méconception, en fait. Donc, il faut qu'ils payent, ça sera...
Well, this is actually a part where I'll admit there is a very grey area. And essentially, in the Franco-American tax treaty, many financial advisors and chartered accountants disagree on this subject. I've been navigating it for many years, but essentially, for retirees, so people that are actually earning money from a social income or from an IRA investment type of income, potentially, and I say potentially, there are no social charges applicable on that type of income. So this is where, well, in some areas of France, people were being charged 9% of their global revenue. In other areas, potentially, well, the tax advice had been given and the taxman hadn't reported, or you hadn't reported that income, and therefore people weren't being charged. What the journalists were trying to say was, well, basically, these guys are moving to France, and they're moving to France because they're going to have free medical care. And I was like, well, that's just not the case. Everybody that moves with our company, at least, definitely wants to contribute to the system. And in most cases, they are actually paying into the system 9% of their global worldwide revenue.
Beaucoup moins cher que chez eux, effectivement, parce que eux, ça va être...
I just was saying here that, of course, in general, you guys will find it, if you're moving from America, so much cheaper to actually use the doctor, the pharmacy, buy prescription drugs.
Du privé, ou alors ils vont avoir quelque chose qui s'appelle Medicare aux États-Unis. Par contre, en fait, c'est pas du tout gratuit. Ça ne serait que gratuit si leur revenu était plus bas que 23.
So I'm explaining here that the only time that it would be completely free and the law would completely, kind of allow you to not contribute anything is if your income was lower than 23,500 euros. And my argument here is that, well, if your income was lower than 23,500 euros, you probably wouldn't receive your visa in the first place. So that the kind of argument that they had was non-existent.
23 000 euros.
This is where it all escalated.
Et alors, du coup, ils n'auraient pas de visa pour venir en France. Parce que pour venir en France,
mais
pour
dans
être
le cas des
retraité...
Mais ce sont des retraités.
Oui, oui.
And this is where the journalist was really kind of saying, well, you're retired, so you must be earning less than 23,500 euros. And what, unfortunately, he wasn't understanding is that in the US, your salaries are higher. So quite often your social income is, of course, a lot higher than people that would be retired in France would usually receive. And this is why he was kind of getting angry, I guess.
25 000 euros par an, ça fait combien par mois? Ça fait 2 500 euros de revenus.
Alors oui,
bon,
mais du coup, vous n'auriez pas votre visa, vraiment. Alors c'est ça le...
So I interrupt him there and say, look, he's kind of saying, well, 2,500 euros a month is a lot of money to receive from a pension. And as I know that most of my clients are actually earning more than that every month from their social income. So he was kind of arguing a point which simply just, he didn't understand the context.
Pour vous expliquer, c'est vraiment la méconception, en fait, on le voit souvent sur nos vidéos. Des gens disent, vous venez profiter du système social, etc. Alors, certes, si c'était des gens vraiment bas revenus aux États-Unis...
Et en moyenne, ils ont combien?
So here she's interrupting me and she's actually talking about how much on average are my clients earning, I guess. And I respond that on average, it's around 6,000 euros per month. I mean, she's really pulling that out of me because it's very difficult to give that value. But on average, most of our clients will be around 2,500 to 3,000 euros per month per person of type of income.
Le cas serait...
And in which case, you'd have to contribute.
Le cas est rare parce que du coup, en fait, les demandes pour avoir un visa renouvelable en France, il est quand même assez strict. Il faut savoir...
And I'm trying to explain to them once more the actual requirements for a French visa.
On va avoir une assurance privée médicale obligatoire pour la première année. Il faut aussi montrer que ces revenus sont assez forts pour pouvoir survivre à la fois à leurs besoins en fait de SMIC, on va dire minimal.
Monsieur Richard Hamon, vous dites en fait à 23 000 on les prendrait pas. C'est comme vous dites, qui payent à peu près 10%, 9%. Quels revenus ont en moyenne les gens que vous faites venir en France pour voir ce que représentent les 10% qui versent à la sécurité sociale française?
En France, il faut qu'ils aient la culture européenne et ça veut dire en général qu'ils sont déjà venus. Ça veut dire que leurs revenus sont plus élevés.
So she's not happy here that I am not answering directly, which is a difficult question to answer. But she wants to know how much money you guys are earning when you're coming over.
Les gens qui viennent ont à peu près 6 000 euros par mois de revenus social, on va dire, c'est-à-dire de leur retraite.
And so this is where I actually answer that on average it's about 6,000 euros per couple. The reality is here, there's actually a bigger picture to look at, which is what does the Franco-American tax treaty really mean and why this is creating a problem towards Americans and not to British people, for instance, that are moving to France. Well, in the treaty, there's a section which is just not clear and it doesn't say how to deal with passive income, essentially. And passive income would be money that you receive from a pension or from an investment account. And in which case, here, this is why people that are using this as clickbait, I guess, online, are kind of wrong in the sense that they're saying, well, actually, other countries are concerned by this law. Mainly Americans are, because in this particular segment, there was no definition of what to do with that passive income. So there was a grey area, and that has been voted on Friday the 7th of November to be reviewed now by the Senate, which will be deciding on a potential new law, which would mean that anyone arriving from a G20 country, so including America, would have a minimum contribution on a yearly basis that would be written in a wordly manner in a law, which would be clearly explicit for Americans in particular, because again, the reason this is so important, it wasn't very clear on the actual treaty itself.
Et une épargne très conséquente.
Oui, mais là, Richard Hamon, là, je vous écoute. Vous faites ce que vous pouvez pour essayer de sauver l'image de ces Américains qui viennent en France. Moi, je suis du sud-ouest de la France, je connais des
Moi aussi,
Américains
je suis
qui
né
se
dans le
sont
Gers.
installés dans des petits villages. Mais là, ce qui est intéressant dans le reportage qu'on voit, c'est pas ces Américains qui viennent en France, c'est ces Américains qui n'ont pas assez d'argent pour se soigner aux États-Unis, ou qui sont simplement un peu cupides et qui aiment bien l'idée de faire des économies, et qui choisissent de venir passer.
So these guys are now saying on the actual whole plateau here, a TV show, that basically Americans that are moving to France are choosing to move for cupid reasons in order to save money because they can't afford medical treatments in the US. And I'm like, this is completely not the case. I mean, it's completely untrue. And they're just making this whole thing up. So don't forget, this was one day before the actual assembly law or assembly vote was due to be held.
Passer leur retraite en France parce que c'est gratos et qui n'ont jamais cotisé de leur vie en France.
So now he's shouting and he's saying that basically people are coming because it's going to be free. They're going to be using the French system.
Qui viennent s'y établir et qui, au bout de 3 mois, ont une carte vitale.
And worst of all, actually, saying that after 3 months, you're entitled to a French healthcare card, which you are entitled to, but you'll never receive within 3 months, by the way, guys, even with our help.
Et qui profitent alors avec 9% dites-vous de cotisation.
And so he's also saying, well, even if they had 9% of actual payments on a yearly basis, that wouldn't be enough money paid in. So it's completely kind of disproportionately being made out that, you know, there's no understanding in reality of the actual rules. And in fairness, the rules are unclear anyway.
Soit, et qui profitent d'un système de soins financé par les Français pour soigner des maladies longue durée, puisque l'exemple qu'on a, c'est monsieur et madame qui sont diabétiques, ou pourquoi pas venir soigner un cancer ou une pathologie grave aux frais de la sécurité sociale française. C'est un peu difficile.
So he's now claiming that people are coming to actually cover their medical needs for high level intensity kind of treatments, such as cancer and all other kinds of things, which, you know, kind of seem a bit out of place and out of context at this stage, but let's let them carry on.
C'est un tout petit peu différent. Donc il y a les Américains qui viennent pour le charme de la Dordogne, et puis il y a les Américains qui viennent s'établir en France parce qu'ils ont des maladies longue durée et que c'est...
So he's trying to break down that there would be two types of Americans moving to France, some of them that actually love France and others that are coming to use the French system, which is frankly, you know, I've never heard of it. So, you know, I'm just listening to this now at this stage.
Voire gratos, de venir se faire soigner en France par rapport au Nebraska, à l'Oklahoma ou au Nevada.
Ben, en fait, je serais d'accord avec vous. Moi, je suis né dans le Gers.
So I'm trying to build some common ground here with him. He's told me he's from the southwest of France. I've then said to him that I'm also from the southwest of France, that my parents have contributed into the system, and so have I. But it's still not going to cut the mustard.
Qui ont travaillé toute leur vie en France, etc. Par contre, vraiment, pour les Américains, vous avez un système de visa.
And I'm trying to then bring it back to the simple fact of the visas and the way that so he's smiling away because I'm kind of repeating myself intentionally here. And I'm also saying that basically congratulating France on their actual immigration policy and explaining to him how this works. But, you know, this is not the agenda clearly that they wanted to take. And they were clearly trying to influence votes on the following day, which was going to be the actual vote for this new law.
Qui est très dur, hein. C'est-à-dire que j'étais aux États-Unis il y a à peu près une semaine.
So I managed to slip in here that I was in America the week before last, and I was meeting, or I met with the Alliance Française of the USA, and I was lucky enough to eat with the ambassador of France to the USA, and I was congratulating them on their great system, which kind of wound them up a little bit more.
J'ai eu la chance de déjeuner avec l'ambassadeur de la France, Monsieur Billy, qui signe en fait, son office signe pour les visas américains. Et aujourd'hui, vous avez aussi un contrôle qui s'appelle l'OFI en fait quand vous arrivez en France.
And I'm trying to explain to them that also when you arrive in France, once you've got your visa, you're actually going to have to go through a system where you are going to be checked for your health general health. So you'll have a blood test, a urine test, etc. That's part of the actual integration before you can become a resident of France. And whilst that isn't a pass or fail, it is still something that they're looking into when you arrive on French soil.
Pour voir quelles sont vos pathologies, c'est-à-dire c'est quelque chose qui doit se faire dans la première année et qui, des gens dans ce cadre-là, si vous le citez de cet exemple, pourraient se voir refuser.
And I'm explaining that if that was the case, if you could be found that you had actually done, you'd enter the country wrongly, so to speak, with bad intentions, that you could probably see your residency card being refused.
Carte de séjour qui n'est renouvelable que tous les ans, hein. C'est-à-dire que...
And I'm trying to explain also that your residency card is renewable every year. So if such a thing was discovered, of course, your renewal could be disallowed.
Autant vous allez avoir la carte... Déjà, la carte vitale, vous l'aurez pas en 90 jours, c'est faut comprendre. Parce que...
So, and then I'm also joking about saying that they won't get their healthcare card within 90 days. So, but clearly they didn't want to listen to any of all of that.
Le système, il est un peu à la bourre. Mais deuxièmement, vous n'allez pas forcément pouvoir renouveler votre carte de séjour si on voyait que ce serait le cas, quoi. C'est-à-dire que c'est quand même assez carré.
And yeah, so then they just cut it off and kind of, okay, well, now let's move on to something else. So what's really interesting is that the following day, after that interview happened live on French TV at Lunchtime News, there was actually a vote at the Assemblée Nationale to propose a new law and to actually make it mandatory for foreigners to entering the country of France with a long stay visa to pay a minimum contribution towards the French healthcare system, which again, I think is like part of this whole debate was that I don't know any American or any person that is using our service or looking to use our service moving to France that wouldn't be for that or pro paying into the systems, right? Nobody expects this to be free. And in fact, when we looked at the videos and the videos that they were showing, I mean, the misconception is that the clients that were saying this was that they were saying that they found that France was such good value for money, not that it was becoming completely free for them. They just couldn't believe how inexpensive it was compared to buying medication in the USA. So up until now, every US expat should have been paying in theory into the system, but there was a loophole that was more or less being ignored or exploited. And now, potentially, because we're just at the beginning of that process of voting a new law, there will be a clear law, word of law, for any country that is part of the G20. And of course, America is the main aim here because, as I mentioned before, this is pretty much the only country where there wasn't a defined rule on what to do with that income, that passive income or that social income. And now this is going to be reviewed and it will go then to the Senate. And if it is approved, it will be voted as a new law. I will, of course, and French Connections will keep you guys updated on this topic. We're constantly being asked more information from newspapers to, of course, TV shows. So you'll probably see me on live TV again soon. But more importantly, guys, there's nothing really for you to worry about. This is just simply a part of a process that wasn't defined enough and will probably be more defined. And we'll be able to give you clear information before you move from the US or from anywhere else for that matter. That, of course, reminds me to remind you guys, if you're thinking about moving to France, to contact us so that we can give you some good tips on how to prepare for your move from a tax point of view, from a healthcare point of view, and of course, the visa pathway in general. So there you have it, guys. Myths busted, hopefully. And if you want to watch the painful live TV session that I had to endure, I've got to say, I wasn't prepared for that. I just thought I was going on live TV. I was quite happy at the time. But you'll be able to click on the link in the description box below or on screen now and watch that translated version. Also, if you want to watch a story that's a lot more lighthearted about a couple that have moved to France, talk about the healthcare and all of the process, the pros and cons of actually relocating, you can watch our next video which is our new series of real French connections, and a lovely story of a couple that moved from Arizona. Once again, thank you so much for watching. And if you liked and enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and see you guys soon on our channel.